Hello! I am here to read the last and final part of Runaway Ralph. Last time we read, Ralph was trying to leave the watch at the sleeping bag. So, let's see how it goes. Chapter 9, Part 2. And he had actually fallen asleep, I think, in the sleeping bag. So, the cot beneath him heaved, and a sudden weight seemed to flatten Ralph, even though he was cushioned by the stuffing. Ralph could not help himself. He squeaked. The weight pressing on him was removed instantly. The springs bounced, 2 feet hit the floor, and Ralph heard Karen's muffled voice say, "That's funny. I'm sure I heard a squeak." "It's your springs, silly," said another girl. "No," said Karen. "It was more like a mouse, and it was right under me." "Quiet, girls, it's rest time," said the counselor. "I better get out of here," thought Ralph, crawling out of his stuffing nest and in between the 2 layers of flannel lining. As he started towards what he hoped was the open end, he heard the swishing sound of the zipper. The top of the sleeping bag was thrown back, and Ralph was exposed for all to see. "Ah!" squealed Karen. "It is a mouse, and he isn't even squashed." Ralph leapt to the floor and was aware of a double row of girls staring at him from their bunks. He darted towards an overturned riding boot, realized that he would be trapped inside, and darted the other way without knowing where he was going. Now all the girls were squealing, "Catch him! Catch him! Don't let him get away! Isn't he darling? He isn't darling in my sleeping bag," said Karen. Sock-clad feet hit the floor. Get a bucket! Get a bucket!" someone yelled. "Catch him under a bucket!" "Girls!" cried the counselor. Ralph darted this way and that. No matter which way he ran, he met feet. He was frantic. He knew he had to find a way to escape before someone clapped something over him. The screen door creaked, so he knew someone had ran outside for a bucket. "A hat!" someone shouted. "Where's a hat?" In his panic, Ralph ran up and over, a foot in a white sock. Its owner screamed. Sam, alerted by the scream, began to bark. A straw cowboy hat plopped down on the concrete floor, making a dark dome over Ralph. The daylight that had shone between the straws seemed like starlight to a mouse. "Look!" shrieked Karen. "A hole in my sleeping bag! He chewed a big hole right in my sleeping bag!" Sam, frantic to protect the girls, scrabbled his paws against the screen door. "It's only me!" squeaked Ralph, but no one could hear him. Ralph was alert, waiting for someone to lift the hat so that he could make a dash, if not for a knothole, at least for the shelter of a bunk. "There's something in the hole in my sleeping bag," cried Karen. "My watch! Look, it's my missing watch!" Feet went padding into Karen's bunk. The screen door opened. 1 set of dog footsteps and 2 sets of human footsteps entered, those of the girls who had gone for the bucket and those of someone else. "Girls, what is going on in here?" asked Aunt Jill. "This is supposed to be rest time." Ralph could hear Sam snuffling around in the circles with his nose to the floor. The girls all tried to speak at once, but Karen managed to tell about finding of her watch. "So Garth couldn't have taken it," said another girl. "And we have the mouse in person right here under the hat," said another. Sam's nose came to a halt at the hat brim. "Hey, Sam, it's only me," squeaked Ralph. In alarm, he was relieved to have Sam sit and began to pant. Ralph pressed his eye to a crack in the straw and saw Sam's long pink tongue hanging out. "But what I don't understand," said Karen, "is how the watch got inside the hole. A mouse couldn't put it there." "You'll never know," thought Ralph in grim amusement. "Aunt Jill, what shall we do with the mouse?" Ralph heard one of the girls ask. "We're going to scoop him up in the bucket." "Not if I can help it," thought Ralph. "Why don't we give him to Garth?" suggested Aunt Jill. "I'm sure he misses his mouse, and I know his feelings were hurt because some people thought he had taken the watch." "Good idea," agreed Karen. "Well," thought Ralph, "that takes care of a lot of things." When the brim of the hat was lifted and the rim of the plastic bucket scraped against the floor, Ralph hopped into the bucket and, with hat still held over him, felt himself being lifted. Then the hat was raised a few inches on one side of the bucket, and Ralph saw a row of eyes staring at him. Ralph could not help trembling, even though he was sure he had nothing to fear. "He's so little," one of the girls marveling. "Aunt Jill, he looks an awful lot like Garf's mouse," said Karen. "You don't suppose—" "One mouse looks pretty much like another," said Aunt Jill briskly. "Now, girls, back to your bunks. I'll take the mouse to Garf." Darkness fell on Ralph as she replaced the hat over the bucket. Ralph felt himself being carried out of the girls' lodge and past the craft shop, where he could hear Chum gnawing at the bars of his cage. Poor old Chum. He heard the door of Garf's lodge being opened. "Garf," whispered Aunt Jill. "Wake up, wake up. I have something for you." "Huh?" said Garf sleepily. "Waking a sleeping boy on a hot summer afternoon is not easy." "I have a mouse for you," said Aunt Jill. "A mouse?" Ralph could tell Garf was wide awake now. "Let me see it." Ralph sat quietly in the bucket while the hat was cautiously lifted. He could see the other boy and their counselor sprawled in sleep on their bunks, and on a ledge over Garf's lower bunk he saw his crash helmet. Karen found him in a hole in her sleeping bag, Aunt Jill explained, and it was the strangest thing. She found her missing watch inside the hole. Ralph saw that Aunt Jill was studying him thoughtfully. "No kidding!" exclaimed Garf, forgetting to keep his voice down. "Yes," whispered Aunt Jill, "and the girls thought you might like to have the mouse." "I sure would," whispered Garf. "I think we can bend the cage back into shape," said Aunt Jill. "Can I keep him here in the bucket?" asked Garf. "He might escape," said Aunt Jill. "But he's your mouse." She smiled and slipped quietly out of the lodge. "You did it," whispered Garf. "Sure I did," said Ralph. "But do I have to sit here in this bucket?" "Of course not," answered Garf, holding out his hand. Ralph leapt into Garf's palm, and Garf gently moved his hand down close to his pocket, and there, as he hoped, was his motorcycle. In the warm and cozy darkness, he ran his paws over the handlebars and plastic seat, the wheels, the exhaust pipe. The motorcycle was intact, and it was his once more. He had earned it. Ralph popped back out of the pocket. "You aren't going to make me go back into that cage, are you?" he asked. "Not if you promise not to run away. I'm taking you back to the inn tomorrow. Remember?" "You haven't forgotten your promise about the motorcycle, have you?" asked Ralph, just to be sure. "Nope," answered Garf. "I won't run away," promised Ralph. "But there's one more thing. Before you leave camp, do you suppose you could give Chum a piece of wood to gnaw so we won't have to gnaw his cage to keep his teeth worn down?" "Why, sure," whispered Garf. "Right after rest time." That need taken care of made Ralph feel better about Chum alone in the craft shop. He was about to climb back into the pocket when Garf whispered, "Do me a favor, will you? Let me see you ride the motorcycle before everybody wakes up." "Sure!" Ralph was happy to agree to this request. Gently, Garf lifted Ralph and the motorcycle to the floor. Then he handed down the crash helmet, which Ralph sat on his head and secured by snapping the rubber band under his chin. Expertly, he grasped the handle grips, threw his leg over the plastic seat, and taking care to keep his tail out of the spokes, inhaled. Ralph took off across the concrete floor while Garf leaned over the edge of his bunk to watch. Ralph bent low over his handlebars and increased his speed. Filled with joy and excitement of speed, he rode in a figure 8 around Garf's cowboy boots, which were laying on the floor. Garf's counselor moved in his sleep, and Ralph shot out of sight under Garf's bunk until the counselor laid still. He rode until he was breathless, and then he coasted to a stop in front of Garf, where he sat panting with his crash helmet pushed back on his head. "Boy," whispered Garf, "was that ever great?" Ralph silently agreed. "I sure wish I could do that." Garf picked up Ralph and the motorcycle and put them gently in his pocket. After all the excitement of the morning, Ralph was ready for a nap, but first he popped his head out of Garf's pocket. "Thanks, friend," he said. "And by the way, don't roll over on me during rest time." "Don't worry," whispered Garf. "I'll get you back to the inn in one piece. And your motorcycle, too." The end. I hope you enjoyed Runaway Ralph. And our book is done. I'm kind of sad. Okay, miss you all. Bye, guys.